Thank you. All right, thank you for that lovely introduction. So as she said, my name's Kelly. I'm a homeschooler wife. I have 5 kids. My oldest is going to be a senior next year, and she's been homeschooled the whole way through. So there's only one grade I haven't done. And when I am not homeschooling, as Katie mentioned, I blog at This Ain't the Lyceum with the tagline because joy is the goal, not perfection. So funny story about the blog name. This Ain't the Lyceum. So when I started my blog 7 years ago, obviously my kids were all much younger, and I needed a creative outlet. So I thought, okay, writing is my thing. I'll start a homeschooling blog, and I'm going to impart all the wisdom I've gained in, all this early elementary homeschooling I've done up to this point. So I went online to see what other bloggers were out there and what they were doing for homeschool blogs. And wow, they were so much better than me at everything. The homeschool room pictures, the lesson plans, kids that were doing like hour-long nature walks and then like doing these nature journals and things. I was like, wow, this is great. I'm never gonna write a blog like that. So I said to my husband, like, what kind of blog should I have? Like, what title should I have? And he thought about it, and he's like, well, we try to do classical homeschooling, but you're saying you're not like these other people, so why don't you call it This Ain't the Lyceum? And I'm like, that sounds great, but what's the Lyceum? So clearly I was a perfect classical educator up to this point. And he's like, that's Socrates' school for classical learning. I was like, I totally knew that. I was testing you. And I thought, this will be great. This will be my fun blog, and it became more of a humor blog than anything, where I recorded how I was not doing wonderful nature studies and dissections of flowers with their parts all laid out and labeled and all those things that you see. The tagline came later, after a few years of writing, and some things had changed in our family, and it was more a reminder to myself than anything, because I did start the blog to sort of remember some of the happy moments. Let's remember some of the happy moments, so I wouldn't keep remembering all the screaming. And because joy is the goal, not perfection. And that's really the theme, and it became an important theme because it's not about things being perfect. Because when you think of a perfect homeschool day, what do you imagine? Okay, here's what I imagine when I think someone's like perfect homeschool day. So here's what I think. I think, oh, well, we're all sitting around together, and it's quiet, and there's classical music playing softly in the background that everybody has really strong, passionate feelings about, but they're not sharing. and somebody's doing math, and they're understanding it all by themselves. And, another child has just come back from being outside and is doing like lovely watercolor in a book and like labeling things scientifically just for fun. And everybody's just quiet, and I'm sitting there in clean clothes, and I'm freshly showered, and I have a fresh hot mug of coffee that has not been reheated 50 times. And we're all at peace because we all completed morning prayers together. We kneeled down and said the entire litany of the saints in Latin. And I think that would be the perfect homeschool day, right? That would be just epic, one for the record books. But I've never had that. I've never had that day. Probably the reality of homeschooling my family can be summed up by a post I wrote years ago. We had just enclosed our front porch and added a kitchen. And on the side was a small, what would have been like an eat-in kitchen area. But I was going to get it as a schoolroom. My own schoolroom. So no longer did we have to homeschool at the dining table with all the food crumbs. No longer did we have to try to homeschool in the basement where water still came in when it was raining. We were going to have a schoolroom. So the night before the first day of that fall, I went in there at night, everyone's in bed, and I just looked in this new schoolroom. I had bought desks, little school desks, little chairs. Everyone had desks. I had a schedule on the wall. Freshly painted cabinets were neat and organized, calendar, everything. And I took a picture. I was like, oh, I'm going to commemorate this. How could we not have the best first day of school in this new schoolroom? How could we not have a great year? All we needed up to this point was just this schoolroom. And now we had it. And it was going to be great. You know where this is going, right? So we started the next day. It was Labor Day. I was so excited. I was like, we're starting on Labor Day. This is going to be great. Heavy downpour rains. Heavy downpour rains. I thought, great. We're not missing out on any picnics or anything. And then the roof on our new kitchen started leaking. And it just came in puddles. So I spent the morning sopping up puddles and watching all this new work in our kitchen start coming down. And, you know, things just kind of went from there. So finally, I turned at one point in the late morning, and I took another picture of the schoolroom for posterity. And if you look at that picture now, you see the before and the after. The floor that was so neatly swept the night before is covered with, like, I don't even know what, but there's debris all over the floor. My youngest son was sitting there with something in his mouth, probably not food, not sure what it was. My middle son was not in the picture because he was off in the dining room with a sensory rice bin, which was now all over my dining room and continued to migrate throughout the entire first floor. We moved in January. We were still finding pieces of that rice bin. And my oldest daughter is in the back at the back desk. She had been crying. So she looks angry and her head is down. She's still in her pajamas. And then my oldest son is at his desk, and he's sticking his tongue out at me and making a face. And his desk, which I just put there the night before, and I just gave him new books, it already has papers falling out of it. Like, it's already, there's paper coming out of it. Like, what even is this? What have you been doing? So that is often the reality of homeschooling. It is not kneeling and saying the litany of the saints and having a hot cup of coffee, unfortunately. But does that mean that we're not good homeschoolers because our reality does not equal perfect? Does it mean that our kids are going to hate learning? Does it mean we're going to kill their natural curiosity? I always took it to mean that any lack of enthusiasm for my plans or ideas, like, oh, we're going to go like hunt for shells on the beach today, or we're going to do this. If they're not met with like, yay, like all the kids I see online for their parents, like, oh, we're going to do these exciting unit studies on St. Paul. We're going to do a unit study on St. Paul and do these flaps and stuff. That's what I'm thinking. Oh, no, they're not like that. They're like, oh, this is awful. I'm thinking I must be doing something wrong. Like, why isn't it equaling what I think it's supposed to be? What I learned is you have to move away from that unrealistic expectation and try to find the true joy even on the hard days, because homeschooling shouldn't be a continuous struggle to achieve perfection at the sake of our sanity. If this is our vocation, if this is what we are meant to be doing, if we discerned it, then God will give you the strength not only to do it, but do it with joy. He doesn't give us any task with the expectation that we're just going to grump our way through it. He didn't give you, make you a spouse so you can be a grumpy, unhappy spouse. He didn't give you kids so you can be a grumpy, unhappy parent. You're not homeschooling just so you can be like, oh, let's do this another day. This will be great. That's not what we're supposed to do when we're given a task. So when we feel anger, sadness, despair, when we start questioning, why am I even doing this? What's the point? Things like that erode our confidence and joy, that's from Satan. Because he sees the good work that you're doing as a Catholic homeschool family, as a Catholic family living your faith, and he wants to stop it. He wants to nip it in the bud. And so he's going to make you doubt yourself. He's going to tell you you can't do it, you're not good enough. That's from Satan, that's not from God. So then how do we work with God to create a joyful homeschool that can withstand these struggles? And I think there's two important things that I've learned. You need to identify your family's unique strengths and gifts And then don't compare your family to another homeschooling family with completely different gifts. Identify what your unique gifts and mission are, and then don't compare yourself to anybody else. 2 things. When you focus on these 2 things, you're going to find that you can achieve lasting joy in your day rather than just fleeting moments of happiness. There's 2 different things. If you look in the Bible, you'll see the word joy, depending on the translation. I looked it up. It varied widely. You see joy hundreds of times, but you don't see happiness. Happiness is momentary. God wants us to have an enduring, everlasting joy in our vocation and on our path. So some examples, like what do I mean between the 2? So happiness, when you finish a page of math, your child finishes a page of math, they're happy. They can go and do something else, and they can move on. That's a moment of happiness. They're not going to continue to relive that wonderful thing over and over and savor it, because there's going to be another math page, maybe in another 20 minutes, maybe the next day. But there's joy in realizing your child has finally mastered a math concept. When you can sit down and they can do it themselves and say, I get it. I don't need you to explain to me anymore. I can do this whole page. I got it. There's joy in seeing the progress and seeing your kids learn these things and teach themselves how to do a lot of this stuff, and in working with them as their mother. At the end of the year, you reach the last day of school. You're happy, you go out, you celebrate, if you're my family, you get a lot of froyo, you feel sick afterwards, you celebrate, it's great, but it's fleeting, it doesn't last. You got to get on to other obligations, other things. It's a good day, it's a great day. The joy comes in sitting down and looking at all the work over the year and realizing, wow, like we actually accomplished something. We got stuff done. Look at this artwork. Look at how so-and-so's handwriting improved. Look at how they learned this. They're reading chapter books. That's joy. That's a lasting feeling that lets you know you're doing what you're supposed to. And then, so when you get a box of books in the mail from Amazon, new curriculum, there's a lot of happiness on those days. Ooh, what could this be? There was a Shakespeare book. So my family, we read Shakespeare plays. We just read them in like a modern translation, and then we watch them. And we just watch them for fun. But this book came out, and I saw all these other bloggers talking about it, how to teach your child Shakespeare. And I thought, this is awesome. This is what we need to take our Shakespeare study to the next level. Like, then we'll be, I don't know, like we'll basically be English lit majors at this point or something. So I ordered this book, and it came, and I thought, oh, this is so great. It's so full of things, and memorizing stuff. And we've never done that successfully before, but this book, this makes it sound great. And we've never done this, but this sounds really great too. And I was so happy when I got the book, but you can imagine, we never used it. So I have a used copy in excellent condition. If anyone is interested, you can see me afterwards. But we take so much joy out of reading these plays together and watching them. And I can honestly say that we have a real love of Shakespeare in the house. All the kids, some more than others. But we read the plays, we laugh, and then we watch them. And it's something that we all enjoy as a family. So that's the difference between happiness and joy and what we're going for in joy. So your family has a unique homeschooling mission, okay? And God does not need you to do any more or any less than that. So define what your family's culture and what your talents are as a family and individuals. What are the unique strengths and gifts of your family? You have them. They're there. Our family, we are a very unique mix of Dom Garaget's liturgical year, John Candy movies, K-pop music, intricate cardboard cosplay, Latin, and some Shakespeare. These are things that bring us a lot of joy as a family. Some, again, more than others. Some of my family would say they hate K-pop, but we listen to it together. It's fine. These are things that make up our family's culture, things that we do together. And you should find what those things are and then embrace them. Embrace what makes your family unique. Don't fight against it. Just because you're the only family in your homeschool group that likes to dress up in intricate cardboard costumes and go to cosplay things, Doesn't mean it's wrong. It doesn't mean you should stop doing it. Just because the family of like 37 kids that like uses nothing but Seton thinks that's awful doesn't mean it's wrong for your family. So unless it's sinful or conflicts with getting your child to heaven, keep it and be proud of it. As homeschoolers, we're lucky because our kids get to grow up outside of a lot of peer pressure and peer culture that's in schools. Not to say there's not peer pressure amongst homeschool kids, but it's not the same for our kids the way it is for kids that are in school like 6 hours a day. Like I know my daughters, I let them wear whatever they want. Like with like modesty guidelines, that's about it. Like just if you get yourself dressed in the morning and you're warm, that's fine. So they have developed a very unique homeschooler fashion sense, and they're fine with it. They're comfortable in their own skin. All my kids have grown up very comfortable in their own skin, and I look at how I was at that age, and I was just as quirky and weird as they were. But every day I was told not to wear that, not to dress that way. It was weird. You look different. I was made fun of and picked on. So our kids aren't subjected to that in the same way. So they can grow up and really be whoever they want and feel comfortable in their own skin. And if that's a gift we're giving them, then shouldn't we work to be more comfortable in our own skin and with our own family strengths as well? So next step would be, once you've defined your family's strengths, family culture, what is important in your homeschool? What makes your homeschool unique? What is important to your homeschool? Not anybody else's homeschool, your homeschool. And if you stopped by my table, you see I have a book, and I talk about in the workbook about creating a mission statement. So we had recently moved, and I had a newborn and 3 older kids up to age like 5, and we were going to be homeschooling, kindergarten, pre-K stuff. And I thought, this will be great. We're in a new house. Homeschooling is going to be so fun and wonderful, and yeah. So we got like a couple months in, and I was a mess. My newborn was super clingy. I was always nursing. He was still always crying. It was just a mess. And so finally, my husband got home from work, and I had been reading like The 7 Habits of a Highly Successful Family or something like that. Like, I need answers. And in a very like agitated state, as only a homeschooling mom who's been home with 4 kids all day under the age of 5 can get into, I was like, I have this list of questions for you, and you're going to answer all of them, and we are coming up with a family mission statement or a homeschool statement or something tonight. Now I'm going to bed. And I went to bed, and I gave him this list of questions. And ultimately, he went through and he answered all the questions. Basically, like, why are we homeschooling? What are the important subjects we want to cover? What are our long-term goals for our kids? And then when I calmed down significantly, I answered significantly, because we needed good answers. I answered the questions as well. And then at the bottom of each page, he wrote what he thought a good mission statement for our homeschool would be. And I wrote a mission statement for what it should be. And then we sat down, we worked together, and we created a more unifying vision for exactly why were we homeschooling and what were our goals. We'd kind of gone into it like thinking, this is great, this is fine, we want to do classical stuff and educate them. But when it came hard and difficult, I didn't understand why I had to go through all this stuff. So it really helped. So our mission statement, it's a little long, and it's clearly, when I read it, it doesn't seem familiar to me. Like, I'm used to it now, but at the time, it must have all been my husband's writing, because I couldn't have written anything this coherent at that point. So it says, our family statement: to form our children's moral imagination to recognize what is good and what is bad, to cultivate the mind for advancement in the virtues, to form their mind for logical thinking and clear expression, to furnish them with a solid knowledge of history, math, and language arts. And that's it. And so every year, that's what my homeschool has to do, those things. As homeschoolers, it's very easy for us to second guess ourselves and always wonder, is it enough? Are we doing enough? Are we doing enough math, enough science, enough extracurriculars, enough music, enough art? Are we reading aloud enough as a family? Should I put in more audiobooks in the car? We're always asking, is it enough? Is it enough? Is it enough? We're homeschoolers. We get to define enough. We get to say, well, enough is enough. So the mission statement keeps the big picture in mind through it all. It defines those things for you. And as your kids get older, it helps you articulate to your big kids your motivation for homeschooling them. Because they're going to want to know. They're going to want to understand why everyone else in their neighborhood is getting on the bus to school. And now you can clearly say, these are the reasons why. Comparison is the thief of joy. We've all heard it. But when we identify what is special in our families, what brings us joy, and what our homeschooling goals are, we can stop worrying about what everyone else is doing. We'll stop comparing ourselves, and we will measure progress on our own terms. We're not going to compare ourselves to Common Core, to what the public school kids are doing, what the private school kids are doing, what the family in the 15-passenger van is doing. We know what we're doing, and that's enough. We can stop doubting our efforts and stop trying to do all the things. And then we have the confidence to move forward in our vocation, not only with joy, but with boldness. We can act without hesitation. We can just move forward. And when we live out our vocations with joy, we're also a joyful witness to the faith. And what is probably one of our primary goals of homeschooling our kids? We want to pass on the faith, right? But we don't want to pass on just a faith. We want to pass on a lively, active faith in cooperation with God's plan. And that's what we get when we try to live out our own vocations as joy. So, who can we look to for inspiration? Who lived out their lives with joy? Lived boldly? Well, obviously, apostles, martyrs, saints. They lived boldly in the faith with joy. And even though sometimes it seems unattainable because, they lived so long ago, they lived in a convent, they're saints everywhere, we can live out our vocation and joy in our homes and communities. Remember, God is asking us to do our unique work where we are. No more, no less. And when we are faithful to Him in our vocation, we are cooperating and we're open to His grace. And goodness, think of the challenges that the martyrs and the saints faced to live out their vocation, and they did it with joy and a sense of humor. St. Lawrence, deacon in the early church, you've heard the story. He was laid on a gridiron, put over hot coals, and after a while he said, "I'm done on this side, flip me over." Wow. St. Philip Neri lived in Rome, worked in Rome. He would hold big dinners for the young people, and other religious would show up, and they'd give him a hard time. They'd say, "Oh, Philip, how much are you eating at these?" accusing him of gluttony. Whereas St. Philip actually lived on very little. But he would laugh. He would laugh with them at himself, even though he knew that they were wrong. He just laughed along with them. St. Francis of Assisi, when confronted by his father about what he wanted to do with his life, took off all his clothes and presented them to his father to show he was leaving one life and starting another. Thank goodness we only need to homeschool our kids, right? That's all we're being asked to do with joy. Flannery O'Connor wrote in one of her stories, she could be a martyr if they killed her quick enough. So let's just be thankful we're not currently being laid over hot coals. So, and just like the joy of the saints converted souls to Christ, living our vocation with joy is what's going to help strengthen the faith in our kids, and really, who knows who else. We really can't underestimate the power of faithful, joy-filled families to spread the faith. The Catholic Church needs joyful people. It needs joyful families to spread the faith. We cannot leave evangelization to sourpusses. It doesn't work. So, God is not asking us for perfection. He is asking us to embrace our vocations as homeschoolers with joy. We will never have perfection, but God has put joy within our reach. And we can find joy in piles of laundry and in juice-stained workbooks. It's joy wherever we choose to see it. And if we embrace our family's unique talents, abilities, and mission, you'll find you can not only homeschool with joy, but live out the gospel message as well, and maybe even change the world for the better. Thank you.